Good evening, I'm Errol Laborde. Marcia is on assignment tonight. There was plenty of hurt this week in the town that even the football coach says is broken. We'll discuss the Will Smith tragedy and what it says about the condition of the city. We'll also look at the latest from the legislature, the defeat of a millage proposal, and our Future Watch segment looks at the growth of biking. Joining us are tonight's informed sources: Jeff Adelson, reporter for the New Orleans Advocate; Jeremy Alford, publisher, LaPolitics.com; and Dawn Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Jeremy, we'll begin with you in the legislature, where there's never been any good news any time lately. But this week, the governor did what he had to do and announced some budget revisions.
Yeah, and that is the big story at the end of week 5 of the regular session, although it feels like 5 years at this point that this legislature and this governor has been going at it. And so, look, the lawmakers were presented a budget several weeks ago, but they didn't raise enough money in the first special session of the year, so they had to revise the budget recommendation from the governor, and that's what they did on Tuesday. The governor introduced $792 million worth of cuts. These are nasty cuts. Nobody wants to see these cuts. Healthcare, higher ed. TOPS alone was cut by $184 million, and that's after $50 million or so was shifted from the savings from the Medicaid expansion into TOPS. So, there's a lot of politics going on right now with this budget. Lawmakers are going to have to take one set of votes on cuts to the budget, $792 million total, and then they're expected to come back in a special session right after the regular session ends, second special session, to vote presumably on a set of taxes to fill that $792 million hole. So some of the politics that are at play is that the governor and his staff have crafted this budget, crafted the reductions in a way that they hope will light a fire underneath the House and Senate, get them to come to some kind of consensus on a revenue plan, and get into a special session. And it's a lot harder than what it sounds like right now.
It sounds hard,
right? Governor Edwards is telling lawmakers, when session ends on June 6th, be prepared to sleep overnight in Baton Rouge. Special session will start the next day. Conservatives, meanwhile, are urging the governor, please wait. Late summer, early fall. Let's see what happens with tax collections, some of these revenue bills we passed over the past year, see if that brings anything in. That may change the situation, lower the number. We won't have to go vote on a bunch of unpopular taxes again.
This week, news came out at the city of New Orleans that there were more tax dollars spent in New Orleans than ever before, more visitors than ever before. Has that impacted the budget at all yet?
No, not really. They're really worried about income tax collections. Money that's going out to support business tax credits, rebates. The sales tax was something that underwent some major changes temporarily in the special session. So that's just not enough money to be infused in the budget to make much of a difference. But right now it's all coming down to the special session. When will the governor call it? What kind of taxes will they pass in that session to raise revenue? And there are some Republicans who are digging in and saying, look, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. And maybe it's time for Louisiana to live with $792 million in cuts to its budget. I think as we move through this session and we start to hear from the families who are going to be losing some of these critical health care services, start hearing from universities about teachers that are being laid off, classes not being able to be finished, I think lawmakers will be a little bit more motivated, especially with TOPS. When parents just fill the hallways, they'll be a little bit more motivated to maybe embrace some more revenue changes in another special session.
What's always part of the process that we see in the news media? Anytime government at some level announces that cuts have to be made, all of a sudden we start getting calls from people saying, boy, don't let them cut from us because look at the impact of it, look at the danger. And everyone has a sad story to tell. Right. And in fact, the fact that it's funded to begin with probably says somebody back then responded to the sad story.
Yeah, look, right, the Russell Long quote, although I think it's attributed to somebody earlier than him, but don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the guy behind the tree. And look, now that's transferring over into fees. Lawmakers cannot raise taxes in the regular session. That's why another special session is needed. But there are fees, and fees are charges just like taxes, except they have to go to a specific program. And there are huge fee packages for DHH, DEQ. There are provider fees that are being introduced. So there are revenue measures in the session. This is being largely overlooked. So if these fees do make it through the process, that's going to shrink that number down a little bit to what they're going to have to raise in a special session.
If the governor was made emperor with absolute power and said, okay, governor, you implement a revenue plan, what would he do?
He would basically be doing what every other governor before him has ever done. I mean, we're kind of in new territory here with an independent speaker, an independent House, first speaker elected in modern history without the nod of a governor. Those days have changed. The governor just can't walk in, drop a document on the table and expect the legislature to pass it as is. Right now the House Appropriations Committee is going through the governor's proposed budget revisions, and I would expect them to make some changes and kind of reprioritize some of these reductions.
How do you think John Bill Edwards is doing so far as governor?
I think he's probably faced one of the biggest political challenges of any modern governor, dating back to Buddy Roemer. He took office with no honeymoon period whatsoever, where you usually get a pass from the press, a pass from your opponents, a pass from the legislature. As soon as he was elected, he was faced with collectively the biggest budget shortfall in Louisiana history. He was facing a House. Before he was even sworn in, he lost the race for the speakership. So it's been a very bumpy road. He's had to try to find his footing in a conservative House. And, meanwhile, he's proposing minimum wage increase, equal pay, some of these items that are very important to his Democratic base. It's going to be interesting to see in coming years if he's not going to move himself more to the center as he gets closer to re-election, and hopefully, supposedly, when Louisiana's coffers start to fill back up with more money.
Well, Jeff, the ongoing question about voters being asked to spend more money on government. Last Saturday, we had a millage election where in Orleans Parish, voters rejected the proposal to increase millage for police and fire. They did allow for a renewal for streets. But you look at this, and this is more than just a millage election. It tells a lot about, at least the polling leading into this, about what's on people's minds and people's moods. Why was this defeated?
Well, it seems so. Just to start off with, the millage lost by about 1,800 votes. It lost about 53.5% of voters cast ballots against it, and this would have brought in about $26.6 million. 2/3 of that going to the police and the rest to the fire department. There seems to be just a lot of general distrust surrounding this issue. In part, that's distrust of NOPD specifically. A lot of questions about whether they were going to be able to meet the recruitment goals that they had set out to do. Some distrust of city government in general and problems with city government meeting their promises, and also some interesting distrust of generally the idea of increasing the police department. There seemed to be a pretty wide split between how white voters and African American voters reacted when they went to the polls. White voters, about 50% of them cast ballots in favor of the millage. Only about 38% of black voters supported the millage. And when you look at some focus groups that have been done before the vote and some polls before the vote, there's a lot of distrust of the idea that more police is the right answer. There's also shortly before the vote actually came, a poll was released by UNO that showed Mayor Landrieu's support was actually falling among the white community as well, largely in response to his position on Confederate and white supremacist monuments in New Orleans. So certainly when you've got a margin that's that close in an election where only 10% of the population turned out to vote, any little factor can sort of can affect that. And certainly there were people out there saying, don't vote for this millage, send a message to Mitch Landrieu that you don't support his message on the monument. So a lot of factors going on there. It's not quite clear how all of those were interacting, but definitely a blow to the mayor's plans.
But this idea of some people thinking that we don't need more police. Only a few months ago, the media, like your newspaper, and I think in partnership with Channel 4, were doing stories about the very slow police response to 911 calls. And the public seemed to be united in saying, yeah, that's a problem. We need a quicker response. So at the same time, can the public be saying, we don't need more police, but we need quicker response call time?
It seems like that's what they're saying. I mean, people still do seem to believe that there needs to be quicker responses from police. And certainly that was a major part of the way that the mayor and Chief Harrison sold this plan, that this was going to be something that was going to deal with response times. You were going to get an officer on the scene quickly when you call. And clearly the voters,
Maybe
at
just
least
didn't
to some
hear that
extent,
message.
Either they didn't hear that message or they didn't believe that message, that that was going to be what was going to solve the problem.
Now, part of this was for fires to satisfy a long-term obligation the city said to the fire department. And the UNO polls showed that the fire department was popular. Did that drag down the whole thing? I mean, should it have been a separate issue with firemen from police?
That's a really interesting question, and I think my understanding is that the administration went into this and bundled the two taxes together because they thought, given all the attention last year on response times, given, that same poll also found an incredible focus on the crime rate. I think the mayor's office looked at this and said, excuse me, if we put these two taxes together, the people that are coming out to support the police officers are going to help the fire millage along, and people who might not believe that they have to pay this $75 million judgment that the city owes firefighters, that they were going to say, well, but we want more police, so we'll vote for both of them. I think what ended up happening, and what you hear a lot on the streets these days, is that people are saying, we understand we had to pay the firefighters. We would have supported the firefighters. Police, we weren't quite so sure of. So I think that in a way backfired on the administration.
Well, Dylan, in your Future Watch segment, in which you were charged to look at the future for us, bicycles apparently, which were once a part of the past, are becoming very much a part of the future now.
Yeah, this is from the Did You Know category, really. Did you know that the city of New Orleans, according to the latest numbers, is 8th in the country for the number of people who commute by bike?
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. I had no idea
It
it was
helps
that
that
much.
we're a compact city, though. If we were,
And flat.
Yeah.
However,
San
even though we're
Francisco would be
8th in the
tough.
country, only 3.4% of the commutes made in the city of New Orleans are made by bike. And the bike enthusiasts are hoping that 5 years down the road that changes dramatically. Most of the people who are making their commutes by bike are making less than $40,000 a year. It's a lot of the service industry workers. It's service industry, hospitality, and educators. The university educators and teachers in lower grades than that. All of that's being highlighted this week and into next week because the weather did not cooperate this week for the 5th annual Bike to Work Week in New Orleans that culminates really next Wednesday with an event in Lafayette Square Wednesday morning between 7 and 10 where everybody who commutes by bike is invited to gather together and register themselves as part of Bike Easy NOLA, get safety information, get special reflective stickers that say I bike to work. The bike enthusiasts are celebrating, though, because right now in the city of New Orleans, or in the region, there are 100+ miles of bikeway available. There were less than 11 miles before Hurricane Katrina. So this is definitely something that's grown. You see the bike lane on Barone Street. You see bike lanes growing, the Lafitte Greenway being open. Old Berman Highway on the West Bank open. Down the road, Franklin Avenue will have a bike lane. St. Charles Avenue's bike lane will be extended. Jackson Avenue will have a bike lane. It's part of a Complete Streets campaign whose goal is to make roads more designed for all kinds of commuting people, be that drivers, walkers, cyclists, to keep them all safe. The biggest obstacles to cycling apparently in the city are the climate. Because depending on where you work and how you work, we all couldn't arrive here sweaty and gross and then be on TV. Do facilities have showers or places for people to change? Are there places for people to park their bikes? This Sunday, the biking industry is going to go out and do a bike parking audit of the city and see where there's more need for bike parking. Their hope is that this really increases the ability for the service industry workers and those lower income folks especially to be able to get to work and have a safe place to park their bike and lock it up, have a safe way to ride to work so that these bike lanes are interconnected. There is some pushback for sure, and there's some lack of education that is being addressed, but trying to share the road with cyclists when you're not used to sharing the road with
don't
cyclists.
they narrow the space?
They have narrowed the space that people have to drive. You're supposed to give cyclists 3-foot clearance on the side. There are public information campaigns that are out now that they're trying to encourage drivers to understand the rules of the road and where cyclists can be, and also cyclists to understand the rules of the road and where they can be. They can be in any lane a car can be in except for on the interstate. So it's something apparently all drivers should be getting used to, because there will be more and more of them coming.
But you can see with more and more people moving back into town and in the warehouse district and those kind of conversions. And if they're working downtown,
it's a whole lot easier and cheaper.
Where it's a short ride, so you can see that happening.
They also focus on the health benefits, both in terms of less car emissions and the health to the person who's actually doing the cycling. So
They miss all the potholes too.
right, or go straight, or get lost in them.
Well, Jeremy, in the world of fundraising, which is essential to politics, today is an important day. Why?
It is. It's for the mother's milk of Louisiana's politics. This is the deadline for political fundraising in Louisiana's federal races. So anyone who is a candidate for any of the congressional races or the U.S. Senate race has to put up or shut up today. They got to show their numbers. The biggest story out of the entire field right now, I think, is probably a man by the name of Dr. Trey Baucom. He is a cardiologist in Shreveport. He's a Republican. He's a first-time candidate for federal office. And in just an 8-week period, he managed to raise $341,000. He has a super PAC that's supporting him already that raised $110,000. So, I mean, collectively, the Baucom effort has almost $500,000 and knocking on the door at $500,000 heading into the second quarter. The other big story.
What is he running for?
He's running for the 4th Congressional District to replace John Fleming. Okay. He's running for the Senate race. And in the Senate race, the big story remains Treasurer John Kennedy. This is a guy who can fundraise. He collected $800,000 since mid-January when he announced. He also has a supportive super PAC that has collected $2.3 million. And if we all remember the David Vitter candidacy, the David Vitter campaign, and then the pro-Vitter super PAC, where Vitter was transferring money from the federal level to the state account super PAC, well, the same thing's happening with John Kennedy. He's transferring money from his state account to a federal super PAC to support his bid, and we don't know exactly how much yet, but I did get the Make Louisiana Proud first 4 pages of its report, and on the line where it says transfers from other committee is $2 million. So it looks like John Kennedy has put $2 million towards the super PAC effort, which makes him his own biggest contributor. Welcome to the super PAC world.
Now, there's been some questions raised about whether that's that follows election rules, right? Whether
right,
you can do that kind of transfer.
And actually, there was a daily newspaper who did a big story on that, and the source that they used on that was actually a campaign finance attorney from the Bustani campaign. So I think we're going to see a challenge to Kennedy on that front about whether he can transfer that money. But at the end of the day, look, there's a Supreme Court decision that likens these campaign donations to free speech. It is certainly precedent setting to have it go from a state account to a federal super PAC. But I think the case law is probably going to be on his side at the end of the day. But I think it's, for his opponents from a political standpoint, it's probably worth the challenge, because if he has a strong suit in this race, it is fundraising. And if they can cut his legs out from there by doing that, it's worth at least a try.
We've also seen a tact in fundraising, which I think the Obama campaign did it, and now we see Bernie Sanders of a lot of people giving a little money. And that seems to have, in some campaigns, being effective too. Yeah,
the smaller donations in larger numbers.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely is, especially in the national race. But I think the whole super PAC entry into the Louisiana elections, when you got these political players who are used to cutting, $25, $100 checks here, $2,500 there, they no longer have to nickel and dime it. They can go cut, $1 million, $2 million check to a super PAC. We saw it a couple of times last year, and really it's creating competition for the state parties. The Louisiana Republican Party right now has a lawsuit trying to get the FEC to allow them to do some of the same things the super PACs are doing. And just as a reminder to everyone, a super PAC is allowed to collect unlimited amounts of donations. There's no limit on a donation that a super PAC can take.
But when they're advertising, they don't say paid for.
It's paid for by the super PAC, and
right.
they have to operate independently of the candidates that they're supporting.
Well, the big news this week, and certainly the tragic news, was the Will Smith case, and we just wanted to update that the breaking story today was that the attorney for the defendant has asked that the police, New Orleans police, not handle the investigation, and that instead it be the state police or the FBI. And so we can tell that this is where this is going, and this is going to be a long, complex story with a lot of angles. But one point I wanted to talk about is that in the discussion, a lot of people, of course, were very upset, but New Orleans took a beating this week in terms of its evaluation. Sean Payton even said New Orleans is broken, and other players have echoed that, and we certainly know that there are problems with New Orleans. But I just wanted to ask, just have a discussion with you people, with your assessment. What does this tell you about the condition of the city? And I'll begin with one thought, is that road rage did not originate in New Orleans. That we know that it's
right.
not unique to New Orleans. Neither did guns, but perhaps there is a problem with too many of them.
Yeah, well, Drew Brees came out this week and talked about some of the culture of violence and that some guys needing to have guns. We've learned, according to the police, that there were at least 2 loaded weapons on the scene of this weekend. And Drew Brees said, he might believe in having a gun at home, but isn't sure about having a gun in a car. So I think it's more the culture of violence than necessarily the culture of New Orleans alone. I don't know.
Well, and it is interesting, as you note, there's nothing, I guess, particularly New Orleans about this tragedy. It's certainly a tragic incident. But it's certainly understandable that it's gotten the attention it has, given how high profile the victim is. But there's
This is 2 guys in cars with guns. It's not 2 guys
Right.
in a bar.
Right.
I think it does read very differently.
At the same time, I think it does. A lot of the commentary that you've seen lately, and outside media from elsewhere in the country has used this to talk about violence in New Orleans more generally. And I think you are seeing a lot of, and this goes back to the millage, this goes back to the results of some recent polls, a lot of frustration among people, a lot of fear among people. The UNO poll found that 30% of the people they polled either had been the victim of crime or were an immediate relative of someone who had been the victim of crime. And that does create a fear within the city. And we've certainly seen on a smaller scale these kinds of intense focuses on crime when there were the Patois robbery or the shooting on Bourbon Street. How to solve that is a more difficult problem. But it does seem like there's a disconnect, at least to a certain extent, between the crimes that get the attention, which aren't necessarily the run-of-the-mill violence that we do see in the city on a more regular basis. And I don't know what how to bridge that, but it does seem like they're 2 distinct things.
Well, it's always been the nature of cities, all cities, to have to care for the poor. Cities are wonderful. I mean, they're the historic and the cultural and the culinary centers of their region, but they also have a social responsibility, and that has always put a burden on the city financially and people that need to be cared for. There are some cities that just seem to be doing a little bit better. I mean, why is it that New York City and Chicago they have a lot more murders when you look at it in terms of rate in terms of the population, that New Orleans is much higher?
And I think that's a very good question that I don't know that there are necessarily good answers to. Certainly our murder rate is a lot higher than those cities.
Yeah, well, and if you go back to the Will Smith case, here you have a guy driving his Mercedes and a guy driving a Hummer. We're not talking about the violence among the poor community. There is a total disconnect between those 2 kinds of crime, and the one with the impoverished community, I don't know how you tackle it except with education, but then you're looking so many years down the road before the problem can be fixed.
Jeremy, what do you hear from Baton Rouge? Have they given up on the city, or they understand it, or any thoughts? Or
I mean, look. I'm not a crime reporter. I've never covered crime, but I do look at this Will Smith tragedy as something I know that's devastating to the community. It's devastating to Saints fans, but it seems like it's such a high profile case that there are a lot of folks who are probably hoping that there's going to be something positive that comes out of it, whether it's some type of change, whether there's some type of community activism, and I think that's what folks are looking for and what they're hoping for. But I do think that folks outside of New Orleans do realize that there's a fight against crime here in this community, like there are in other communities around Louisiana.
Sean Payton says he hates guns. Imagine if a football coach would lead the charge, would become like a national spokesman, if he brings some players along with him and just speaking out. You're not going to get rid of guns, but maybe if they could be in a position to make guns a little bit less attractive to people out there that follow them. That could be.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of testimony at the state capitol is usually pretty impactful.
Yeah, that could be a start. So, looking into the more immediate future, what should we be looking toward?
Into the more immediate future, well, there is some good news on alternative types of transportation. RTA is going to be expanding service on a number of its routes starting Sunday, including about 9 routes that are going 24-hour service, which is designed to address a lot of concerns about getting people to work and getting people home from work late at night, given the 24-hour economy in New Orleans. So,
okay, Jeremy.
These next 7 to 10 days will be a good test for Governor John Bel Edwards' key proposals in the legislature, such as the minimum wage increase, equal pay, and I also think looking a little further out, the next 2.5 months, depending on how the budget plays out, the second special session, I think whatever does happen over the next 2.5 months could set the tone for the next 4 years.
Okay, Don?
Bike to Work Day postponed till next Wednesday, the 20th, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. at Lafayette Square, and they'll have coffee and donuts and free bike repairs too.
Jeremy, any new names in the Senate race, real quick?
Joshua Pellerin, who is an oil executive from Acadiana, announced last week for the race. He is a Democrat who has very close ties to Barack Obama. He is the latest one to jump into the field.
Okay. Well, thanks all of you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks all of you for watching. Let's all hope for a happier week next week. But whatever happens, we'll be here to talk about it. Bye-bye.